Mark Manson, this is the third time that you've come on the podcast, but this time we're meeting in person.
Yes, in the flesh for the first time. What's up, everybody? Mark Manson here, #1 New York Times best-selling author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a
I feel like more and more people are not drinking, and it's becoming a lot more accepted these days than what it used to be.
Alcohol was my solution to boredom, and it was my solution to anxiety.
Do you have a lot of friends from when you weren't famous?
I do have old friends from the before times. Most of them are some combination of proud and confused. I do think with, I guess, success and some amount of fame, like friendship does start to become more complicated. It takes years to build trust, and you can ruin it in like 5 minutes. Why did I work so hard for 20 years? If not to be at the point where I can turn down things that are not exciting. Like, that's the whole point of working your ass off for decades, is to reach a point in life where you don't ever have to do anything you don't want to do.
Mark Manson, this is the third time that you've come on the podcast, but this time we're meeting in person.
Yes, in the flesh for the first time.
In the flesh, and you look like you've been on a bit of a health kick.
Yeah.
You're looking very well.
Thank you.
What has led you to want to show up in a more kind of healthier way, I suppose?
Do you want the long version or the short version?
Yeah, no, please. It's interesting.
Sure. So I was one of those people who just never thought much about physical health.
Yeah.
You know, I was young, I was indestructible, I used to drink a lot, travel a lot, party a lot. And in my 30s, it caught up with me. I had a health scare, I think around 35 or 36. I was writing 2 books at the same time, traveling, doing speaking, drinking all the time. And one morning I started having chest pains, and I have heart disease that runs in my family. So that scared the shit out of me. And it turned out that the heart was fine, but the doctor was like, "Tell me about your diet." And I was like, "Ooh, all right." And then he asked, "Have you been stressed lately?" And I was like, He was like, how much alcohol do you drink? And I'm like, oh God, here we go. And so basically he told me, like, point blank, he's like, "You're a ticking time bomb. Like, you're fine now, but on this trajectory in 10 years, you're not going to be fine."
Yeah.
And given your genetics, and I was obese at the time, and it was just, wasn't sleeping and all sorts of stuff. So that kind of woke me up a little bit. And then from there, it was actually a very long process of, because I think what happens to most people is they're like, okay, I need to get healthy. I need to lose some weight. And they start like trying to lose, I don't know, 5 kilos, 10 kilos. And you lose some, but like, you still don't really understand what you're doing.
Yes.
You're just like, okay, I'll just skip dessert and go to the gym and like lift a couple things. You're not integrating it into your lifestyle. You're not like adapting new habits, new identities around it. And that's what I did. And and like most people, my progress plateaued, and I gained a bunch of weight back, and it was just really hard for a few years. And so then there was kind of like a second process, which was like, okay, how do I actually get my shit together?
Yeah.
How do I actually figure out the health thing? And that was a much more psychological process. It was about dealing with my own emotional triggers, my own habits, my lifestyle decision, my relationships. A lot of my socializing revolved around alcohol and food. A lot of my relationship with my family revolved around alcohol and food, and those things had to change, and that affected friendships and relationships. And so that, I feel like that's the answer that never gets talked about, but that's the actual work that has to be done. Like, if you've built a very unhealthy lifestyle like I did, building a healthy lifestyle means removing a lot of the things that are you, that you identify with, that you live with day to day.
Do you still drink alcohol now?
No.
Yeah, it's interesting, the non-alcohol thing, because as I just mentioned to you before we started this podcast interview, I was just in the States for a couple of weeks, New York and LA, and the people I hung out with did not drink.
Yeah.
And I really drink here and there, not much, but it's never been kind of an issue for me. My family don't drink, so I never grew up with it. So it's like, oh yeah, maybe once every few weeks, if we go out, I'll have like a martini or something like that. But I have never actually in my whole life drunk at home, like by myself ever. Like never in my life. It's just not been something. I don't look at alcohol as like, oh, got to, have a drink to take the edge off or anything like that. But it's interesting because I feel like more and more people are not drinking, and it's becoming a lot more accepted these days than what it used to be. And I wonder, has it been hard for you going from drinking a lot to not drinking at all?
It's funny because when I stopped, my worry was that it was going to be very hard, that I was going to crave alcohol.
Yeah.
I didn't have those sorts of cravings, like I guess that you would say like an addict has. The hardest thing for me was the social part, and then also I was bored all the time. So like what I discovered is that alcohol was my solution to boredom. And it was my solution to anxiety. And so when I quit drinking, there were a lot of situations that I used to enjoy that I suddenly found myself bored and anxious in those situations. And that was a complete mindfuck, because then that suddenly like half of my hobbies aren't actually my hobbies. They were just excuses to drink. A lot of my friends actually weren't friends. They were just they were just drinking buddies, right? So that was the hardest part, is like actually going through this process of like, I have no idea what to do this weekend. Nothing sounds fun to me. And these people that I've known for years, like I don't really like being around them anymore.
Why was that?
I think, well, nobody likes to be drunk alone, as you just pointed out.
Absolutely not.
And if you're somebody who likes to drink a lot, like I did, you tend to gravitate towards other people who like to drink a lot. And when you're drunk, you're not really engaging with people on like a very deep level most of the time. And so what I realized is that I had a number of friendships that really just revolved around getting fucked up together and having a laugh, and which is fine. But once I was sober, I realized like I don't really have anything in common with this person, and now that they're drunk and I'm not, they're kind of obnoxious, and I'm tired. It's 10 o'clock. It's time to go home and go to bed. So it just threw a wrench into my life in a bunch of other unexpected ways. Like the actual, I crave a drink, preventing myself from having one like that. I didn't find that particularly hard.
That's so interesting. I wonder, from a weight loss perspective, what are your thoughts on Ozempic? Because I just recently did a tour with Johan Hari, and he just obviously wrote the book on Magic Pill about Ozempic. So quite a bit of the tour, when we were talking to live audiences, we talked about Ozempic. So I feel like I know quite a bit about it now.
Sure.
What made you not want to try this drug that a lot of others have gone down the path to try?
Well, by the time it came out, I had already lost most of the weight that I wanted to lose. I think if I was starting today, I would totally take it.
Yeah.
I ran into a lot of trouble. So I'm very sympathetic to Ozempic as somebody who struggled a lot to lose weight, and like as part of my journey, like nothing drives me crazier than people who are like, it's just calories in, calories out. Just eat less, bro. Like it pisses me off so much, because I tracked my calories for years. I tracked my food for years, and it just, stuff didn't seem to add up. And it finally reached a point where my health coach was like, you should go get your blood work done, because these numbers just, they're not adding up. And sure enough, when I got my blood work done, my hormones were all fucked up. Like, my insulin was through the roof. I was pre-diabetic, like a bunch of bad shit that it's like clear, like, your metabolism is not functioning correctly.
Yeah.
Right. And I think there's a lot of obese and overweight people who are in that same camp. And it's not, things aren't as simple under that it's not as simple as like, just, stay at a 300 calorie deficit and you'll be fine. You know, it's like that works when your metabolism is functioning
Yeah.
correctly and your hormones are functioning correctly. So I'm very sympathetic to the drug. I think the research around it is incredible. It's very exciting. And I think the fact that they're seeing so many benefits outside of weight loss. They're seeing addicts who struggle to kick addictions are able to kick them on Ozempic. They're finding that smokers are able to stop smoking on Ozempic. They're finding that people with like arthritis are seeing their symptoms decrease. There's just all these insane benefits to it. That tells me that it's like this is not a calories in, calories out thing. It's not it's not just that it makes you feel full, that it's working. It's doing something, you know, in your metabolic system and your digestive system that is having these like second, third order effects all around. So I'm super excited by it. And I don't understand it. I get annoyed when people are like, oh, people are cheating by taking Ozempic. It's like, you don't know what other people you don't know what they're going through.
Yeah.
You don't know what their genetic history is. You don't know what their family history is. You don't know the food they were raised on. I was raised on garbage food. And so I literally didn't know, like my idea of a healthy meal was like, you know, oh, there's a little lettuce on my fried chicken sandwich. Like that's a vegetable, you know, like that was my level of knowledge until I was in my 30s. And so it's I think there's, I'm just very sympathetic to it.
Johan used this analogy that I thought was really interesting, you know, in regards to himself, because he also had said he was, you know, quite obese and there was heart problems within his family. He said, look, I look at Ozempic as this. If you've got a fire and your house is on fire, you're not going to go, oh, we should have used this to build it and not this and X, Y, and Z. You're going to put out that fire straight away. And that's what Ozempic does, right? For people who are obese. And then, sure, after that, you can go into that this is the way you eat properly and this is what I need to do for long-term health. But to put out that initial fire for people who are obese when they, you know, nothing is shifting the weight, then it works really well. I wonder for you, what were the changes that you made to be able to get to where you are now with your health, besides not drinking?
So drinking is definitely, you know, I tell people there's a top three, right? So first one was hiring a coach, just the accountability, the direction, outsourcing the brain power, because what I started to notice, you know, once I got a year or two in, I initially lost like maybe 6 or 8 kilos pretty quickly and then plateaued. And then I would kind of rubber band around, like rebound. And I started to get really frustrated. And what I noticed is just like, I'm spending too much, like it's hard for me to think about this and I'm not an expert. So outsourcing the thinking about it to somebody that he could just come in and just be like, all right, here's your meal plan. Here's your workout plan. We're going to do this for 4 months. And then we're going to measure you every month. And then we're going to see where you're at. Right. And then we'll adjust. Like outsourcing that to somebody was just very critical, but most of the value was just the accountability. Like nothing felt worse than, getting on a call with the coach and, literally doing nothing that he told me the week before. And just like watching his face as I tell him this and just have him kind of like shake his head and be like, okay, all right. If you want to pay me this much money to literally do nothing I tell you, okay, let's try again. You know? So that was the first one. The second one was tracking. And I was very resistant to tracking. Honestly, in hindsight, for stupid reasons, I was like, oh, but you know, if I go out on a date night with my wife, I don't want to have to worry about like what's in the cheesecake or, you know, like all these dumb excuses. And the tracking was massive because ultimately we lie to ourselves. And we lie to ourselves in all these little ways all the time. You know, we tell ourselves like, oh, well, you know, that wasn't that many French fries, or you know, I walked a lot today, so I deserve a candy bar, right? Like all these little bullshit things that in isolation, they don't sound very bad, but when they accumulate over multiple weeks or months, they sabotage your entire progress. So the tracking like forces that reality in front of you. Like, no, dude, you overate and you're lying to yourself if you think you didn't. It also gamifies it, which for my personality, I really enjoyed. I discovered I really enjoy going into the gym, looking at what I did last week on that workout, and then trying to beat it. Like there's a competitiveness that kind of like taps into. And then, what's the third? Oh, the third thing was alcohol. It just, that, and again, kind of coming back to the metabolism thing, I cut back, through the tracking and the coaching and everything, I cut back on alcohol quite a bit over the course of, 2 or 3 years, and basically got it down to, probably having 3 or 4 drinks a week. And I was still stalling. I was still plateauing. And my coach was like, you should do a month or 2 or do 3 months without it. Just see how it goes, And I was like, I'm like, it's only 100 calories per glass of wine. Like it can't be that bad. But coming back to the metabolism thing, the hormone thing, as soon as I dropped it, it was like,
bang.
Everything started working the way it was supposed to start working. And I started sleeping better. I had more energy every morning. My workouts got better. I got stronger faster. Everything started compounding on top of it.
That's so interesting. You touched on friendships before, and I want to talk a little bit about that. I wonder for you how your friendships have evolved over time. Obviously your rise to fame, which we've talked about on our other podcast episodes we've done together, happened really fast. Mm-hmm. And I wonder, do you have a lot of friends from, when you weren't famous? How has that journey for you evolved?
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I do have old friends from the before times. And most of them are some combination of proud and confused. One of my favorite stories is so on my last book tour back in 2019, I did I was going to all the major cities in the US and doing a big book launch thing and like doing a small theater tour. And one of my childhood friends was living in San Francisco at the time. And so I invited him out. I was like, come hang out. We'll catch up. You can hang out backstage, all this stuff. And he was like, yeah, cool. And so we like spend the day hanging out. He comes to the venue with me. We do like sound check or whatever. And I got him like a front row seat. And so anyway, the show starts. I walk out on stage. Everybody's like screaming and clapping. It's like probably 600 people, 800 people. And I look down at the front row, and my buddy, who I've known since I was like 12, my buddy is sitting there, and he's like, has his hands up, like shrugging, and he like looks at me, and he's so confused, and he was like, and he mouths the words, "What the fuck?" to me, like,
ironic.
And he was just like, why are they clapping? It's just this asshole.
They knew what I knew.
Exactly.
So funny.
Exactly.
There's something so beautiful about the old friends, though. Like, they're very humbling, and especially the ones that have your back through thick and thin.
Yeah. So I think it's really important to have those people. They keep you grounded, and they keep you sane. Because I mean, what happens? I do think with, I guess, success and some amount of fame, like friendship does start to become more complicated. Simply because it's not that I'm like distrustful of people's intentions, but you start becoming exposed to people with different intentions. Like when nobody knows who you are, generally if you meet somebody and they're nice to you, it's just because they're a nice person or they actually like want to get to know you or whatever. When you're a public figure and you're like known to be very successful, people do start showing up looking for something or trying to kind of get something out of you or try to like weasel their way into your life in some way. And it doesn't happen frequently, but it happens often enough that it starts making you skeptical of people. And I've definitely found that disappointing. Like, I don't like being skeptical of people. I don't like having to ask myself, like, does this person want something from me? Like, are they being nice because they're just nice, or like, are they being nice because I'm Mark Manson? And
Oh, absolutely.
yeah. So it's yeah, that kind of sucks.
I wonder how you go with jealousy, because that's something that I've had to deal with. And I feel like it can really get you in the heart, where you've been friends with people for a long period of time. And then especially for me, in a very short period of time, it's like, oh, she's got a book. Oh, she's got a tour. Oh, she's got this and this and this. What's happened?
Yeah.
And you can feel when someone's not genuinely happy for you. And I write about this in my book, where there were friendships that I realized I had to let go of.
Yeah.
And I wonder how you've dealt with that.
That happens too, but I see it as like, there's something about, I've noticed that more on the money side, and maybe, I don't know, maybe this is a male thing, but a lot of men measure themselves by how much money they make, and they compare themselves based on money. And so I've definitely had a few people in my life who got very weird around the financial success. And you'd start getting these kind of snarky comments of like, I'd get invited somewhere and they're like, yeah, but you don't have to come because that's probably not the sort of place that you go to these days, shit like that. And it just feels bad, and you can kind of sense there's like a little bit of resentment that starts to bubble underneath the surface. And yeah, it sucks. But to me, that's revealing of character. Like what I've found is that the people who genuinely love me are the predominant emotion is just excitement and pride for me. And the people that have that jealousy or resentment, to me, that just signals that the friendship was never that strong, and that we weren't, my best interests weren't being put first before, but it just wasn't apparent because there wasn't this huge discrepancy, right? So that makes me feel a little bit more comfortable of just kind of letting it go.
Yeah.
And I also feel like some of it's like not really about me. It's like they have issues around money. They have insecurities, and it's like, well, let them go sort that out somewhere else.
And I think you get to a certain age as well where you don't need like so many friends.
Yeah.
Like from when you're in your 20s to then 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, you realize, it's cliche to say, but it's true. You have 5 good friends or 3 good friends or whatever it is. Because, how much time do you have anyway to nurture those friendships? And they are so solid, rather than 30 friends who, it's a fleeting kind of relationship.
Right.
And it's not that, rich, full of trust and personal things that you speak to them about. That having less is a much better thing as well.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it's funny too, because one of the things that I've noticed as well, I think it's just human nature that you want to spend time around people that you relate to and who relate to you. And so what I've found is that the majority of my new friends over the past 5 or 10 years are authors, podcasters, YouTubers, like people, entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Because it's like, those are the people that understand my life and I understand their life. And it's an industry, like there's not a ton of us. So it's kind of hard to find people who get what you're going, if you're struggling with something, or if like, you're having problems with your agent, or if your audience is turning against you for some piece of content. Like there's not many people who understand what that feels like and what have gone through that. So what I've noticed is that there's a lot of networking that happens. Like people are sometimes surprised to know that like all of the big authors of I guess, the last 10 years in my industry, like, we're all friends.
Are you?
Yeah, we all know, like, me, James Clear, Ryan Holiday,
Yeah.
Shane Parrish, like, Tim Urban, like, we all
Yeah.
text each other, talk to each other all the time. And I think a lot of it is that reason.
Yes.
It's just like, there's not many people in the world that have millions of followers and like know what it's like to deal with some of the problems that can come up.
Yeah, it's so true. I know Andrew Huberman's business partner, and we were talking the other day, and you know, he also produces this podcast, and I realized for the first half an hour we just talked about podcasting.
Yeah.
And it was like two geeks just
Yeah,
going, what
it's
about this,
fun.
this, and have you realized this, and da-da-da. And I was like, this is the best geekified conversation about podcasting. But you're in it. Like, I was a producer before I was of a podcast, before I did my own. This is like something I've been in for such a long period of time. And when someone gets it, like what you were saying about your author friends and your podcast friends, it's just like you have the ability to go, what about that? What about that? Have you tried this and this? It's amazing.
Yeah. It also, it's funny, it's made me understand why celebrities date each other.
Yes.
Because, like, I guess when I was young and naive, I was just like, oh, of course they're dating because they want more attention or, you know, they want to be in the tabloids. And as an adult now, I'm like, no, I get it, because there's, you know, if you're Brad Pitt or Gwyneth Paltrow, whoever, there's really only a few dozen people on the planet who understand what your day-to-day life is
100%.
like. And so it makes sense that you would want to date somebody who understands what that's like, because if you date someone who doesn't, there's like going to be such a huge learning curve. Yeah,
absolutely. I know that you write and talk on a lot of personal development topics, and I wanted to speak to you about love because, you know, it's something I think about a lot, but something that has evolved over time. And I wanted to use this example. I mean, when this episode comes out, it will be a few months ago, but it was only 2 weeks ago when our family dog, we had to put her down. And it was actually just over a week ago, and she's 15 and a half. We had a beautiful time with her. And I don't know if you've ever had a dog, but they're your shadow, right? So everywhere you go, she's older than my kids are. So we got her before we, had kids. And it was heartbreaking, right? Absolutely heartbreaking. And we're all, the kids with us, everything, when we're at the vet, and we all stayed in the room. I was holding her, you've never cried so much in your life. And we're driving home, and I said to my family, I know the feeling now of like your heart actually hurting, because my heart actually feels like it's in pain right now.
Yeah.
And that just shows to me how amazing this thing called love is, and how real it is, and how the heart does feel. You know how we always use those kind of terms, but it's like it is this organ that you can feel. And I have done this through like heartfelt meditations and things like that, where you go, wow, the power in there is extraordinary. And I wonder what you've learnt about love over, your time.
Yeah. Well, I haven't put a dog down any time recently.
Horrible.
I've lost pets in the past, and it's awful. It is awful. Love is it's a little bit paradoxical in like my school of thought, because on the one hand, I do think it is one of the most valuable life experiences, sensations, emotions, like whatever you want to call it. It's one of the most meaningful and important things in life. You could actually probably argue that it is what drives meaning in life, is like a love for something, whether it's a person or a cause or a place or a group of people. That said, one horse. No, this is a terrible time to use this saying, but one dead horse that I like to beat is I think people tend to overestimate the importance or utility of particularly romantic love. And I generally see this happen with people who struggle in their relationships and are maybe single and struggling to date. they put love, and particularly romantic love, kind of on this pedestal, and it causes them to make a lot of bad decisions around it. So I think love is incredibly important, and I do think in the context of in the context of, say, like dealing with trauma or insecurities, it can be healing. But what I see is that when people are in a bad relationship or a dysfunctional relationship where there's no trust or respect, they assume that love will fix that, but actually love can make that worse. Like love, the health of a relationship is determined by the trust and respect. The love will amplify whatever the health of the relationship is. So if you have a very unhealthy relationship, then being in love with that person will make it 10 times more painful. It won't make it not painful. It'll make it more painful. But if you have a very healthy relationship where there's a lot of trust and respect, then the love amplifies that health, and it makes the love even healthier and even more healing, right? So love itself is not, I think, the thing that heals. I think it amplifies what's underneath, and that's driven by trust, respect, acceptance.
What do you think makes a very healthy relationship and a relationship last?
Well, a healthy relationship, as I mentioned, I think trust and respect are like the cornerstones. Like if you lose those, nothing else is going to work until you get them back. And again, I think a lot of people mess that up. You know, they will be consistently disrespected by their partner, and they'll like ask me for advice on romantic dates. And I'm like, none of that shit matters. You know, like it's until there's like a healthy, respectful, mutual respect between you two, like nothing else you do matters.
How do they fall in love with someone that's being so disrespectful?
Because their map of what being loved is being disrespected. So they probably grew up with parents who disrespected them, and that is what they understand love to be. And so they seek out partners who disrespect them. Yeah. And to them, it's normalized. They're like, this is what it looks like. And they probably spent much of their childhood trying to compensate for that disrespect or placate or please or live up to some standard. And so they just follow the same pattern in their relationships. You see this pattern of like a person with a disrespectful partner won't blame the partner, they'll blame themselves. They're like, well, I should have been better. And if I had just done this differently, and maybe if I talked to my partner differently, this wouldn't have happened. And so you get this really ugly spiral that happens. They actually end up enabling more disrespect because it's human nature that if you don't respect somebody and they still keep coming back to you, you just respect them less. Yeah. So the respect in trust plays out in a very similar loop as well. It's once trust is broken, trust is much more easily broken than it is constructed. It's like a very fragile thing. Like it takes years to build trust, and you can ruin it in like 5 minutes. So those are the bedrocks of relationship health. I think longevity really comes down to more shared values and making sure you're aligned in terms of like vision for yourself and the things that you care about and the things you want to pursue over the long run. They don't have to be the same things. Again, there needs to be a mutual respect for those things. It's like, okay, you want to be a podcaster and I want to go, work on oil rigs in the Atlantic. And as long as you understand each other and respect those life paths and find a way to get your needs met within those life paths, then it can last. And a lot of that also comes down to communication. Like communication, it's when you get into longevity, that's where communication starts mattering, just because you have to keep checking in with each other of hey, this is my life path. This is where I'm heading. Can you support me? What's your life path? How can I support you? That's essentially just the day-to-day work of a relationship.
That's so interesting, but I feel that to be very true. And I think, like you said, it's very interesting to see, where someone's come from and what they believe, like, love is, or how to get to that point through how they were treated when they were young.
Right.
And then obviously everything can be undone. Seeking therapy and doing those sort of things are very helpful to anyone who has had a harder upbringing. And, they'll be able to have like a beautiful relationship moving forward.
And that's, so that context is actually an interesting, like, I think, let's say you are a person who grew up in a family that disrespected you, treated you poorly, and you grew up with all these insecurities, low self-esteem, etc. When you do find a partner that respects you and helps build you up, it's funny because love gets the credit, but I think it's actually the respect doing the work. I think the love is what amplifies the respect. It's, again, it amplifies whatever's happening underneath. And so it makes that respect much more powerful and healing. But ultimately, it's finding that partner who isn't going to walk over you and is going to listen to your needs, or actually push you to share your needs and actually, demand that you stand up for yourself. That's when it becomes healing.
You obviously had your book, The Art of Not Giving a Fuck, which is still, any airport you go to 100 years after you've released it, it's still up there as like our pick of the week.
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, I've never seen a beast of a book, still being in the bestseller. And then you had your movie that came out, and we spoke about that last time. But then I know you took a bit of a break, and I wonder, how's that been for you? And how do you go from having those massive dopamine hits where, I know you're doing a live tour at the moment.
Sure.
So that surely is a dopamine hit as well. Yeah. But, going from being on every media outlet to then taking time to kind of step back a bit. How do you find all that?
Amazing, honestly. It was, initially I did it because I just felt very burnt out, but I think in hindsight, it's interesting to use the word dopamine, because I think in hindsight, it kind of, like, the amount of stimulation that was going on and the amount of work I was doing, like, I think I needed to detach and detox a little bit from that, like, again, come back to earth, just for my own sake. And because I really started experiencing it as pressure. Like, the human mind is wired in such a way that we don't stay grateful for things very long. Like, any good thing that happens to us, that quickly kind of becomes our new baseline expectation. And anything that doesn't reach that level suddenly feels disappointing. And so it's like, as my career kept building higher and higher and higher, that baseline kept getting raised. And so it like, you find yourself just having these, like, really absurd thoughts of I'd go to London and I'm like, oh, the BBC only want to interview me twice this time. Last time I was here, they interviewed me 4 times. Like, shit, have I peaked? Like, is this getting, like, just, you start having these, like, ridiculous insecurities and getting upset over dumb things, like, it's a venue didn't get sold out, and its capacity is smaller than the other one that you sold, like, you start, the little things start getting to you. And in my case, it just felt like pressure all the time. It was like everything always had to be better all the time. And it was killing me. Like, it was just making me absolutely miserable. So, I think that's what was going on underneath the hood. I think consciously I just experienced it as burnout and just not being happy. So yeah, I initially took 3 months off. My plan was to initially take 3 months off, and I got to the end of 3 months and I was like, I don't want to do a fucking thing. Like, I'm enjoying my, like, chilling on the couch. So I think it ended up being around 6 or 7 months before I started. And even then I came back slowly and really didn't ramp up again. when I came back, the agreement I made with myself was, I'm not going to do anything that is not exciting. That's not fun. If it's not fun, like, fuck the money, fuck how famous the show is or whatever. If it's not fun, don't do it, because it's...
What were you finding fun?
Ironically, a lot of the speaking, but it's it's a lot of the corporate speaking.
Yeah.
You know, it's like a huge part of this career is getting invited to these big conferences and corporate events, and they pay you an absurd amount of money. And when the email comes in, it's like very sexy and exciting. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe they're going to pay me that much to stand on stage for 30 minutes. And they're actually not paying you to stand on stage for 30 minutes because there's, there's like multiple pre-event calls, and then you have to fly out 3 days early, and then you're jet lagged, and then you have to do like all these pre-event meet and greets and rehearsals and VIP sessions, and then you got to talk to the organizers, and then you got to do sound checks, and then you go on stage, and then there's like all these obligations afterwards, and next thing you know, it turns into like 2 weeks of your life, and you're in like some random country that, you know, you're just like, I kind of just want to go home.
I'm so fascinated by this because it's my life too. So I'm like, what don't you like? Tell me.
Yeah.
But it's true. I get it. Where you're like, oh, I'm in this hotel, and
and it's
weird.
It is, and it's what I discovered is I like the speaking thing, the event thing. It should feel like a special thing, which is, you know, like the tour I'm doing in Australia. You know, they came to me, and the first thing they said is, they're like, we want to put you in the opera house. And I was like, okay, you have my attention, you know, and I do love coming down here. Like, the turnout is always great here. The fans are great. I love the country. It's just so nice down here. So,
and when it's your own speaking tour, it's a little bit different.
It's totally different because they're there for you.
Yeah.
Like when you're speaking to like the Nebraska Car Insurance Association, like nobody cares what you're saying. Nobody cares. Like they're they're completely checked out. So it is like you're just there for the paycheck, and they're just there because their boss told them to be there. So
and they come up to you, they go, I haven't read your book before. Actually, I didn't even know who you were, but I loved what you said about this. And you're like, ugh.
Yeah. So it is different when it's your own people. Yeah. And I do like getting out and meeting the fans periodically because it's, again, it comes back to that, like, staying grounded and connected to, like, I think you probably relate to this too. It's like sometimes you can get so lost in like analytics and data and how many downloads did we get this week and are we growing this month, and you know, like it becomes a very abstract thing, and
I don't like that.
Yeah, the audience
hurts me a bit.
The audience just becomes a bunch of numbers.
Yes,
and you're just trying to get the numbers to go up, and so I love doing stuff like this because then you get face to face with people and you hear their stories, and you know you hug them, and you know, see their excitement. It feels really, really great.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like, obviously doing my tour, I was like, this is the best. Like, and especially when you have people that come up to you that might have, you know, emailed you or got in touch with you, you know that they've been part of your journey since the beginning.
Right.
And you're like, wow, like I'm finally meeting you. Like you have such a soft spot for people like that. And yeah, the fact that I sit in a studio a lot of the time or write, and I don't see that live audience, and to get the chance to be able to do that, I think it's so beautiful. Yeah. It's really, really nice. I wonder for you now, you know, you talk about your mental health journey a bit. How are you now, and what do you do to keep everything in check?
Honestly, today I'm some of the happiest I've been in my life.
It's amazing.
Yeah. I think a huge part of that's the physical health, and you know, taking care of that front, like that definitely makes a difference. And I think the other part is kind of the thing we just talked about is like, I don't do things if they're not fun. And it's because I just kind of hit a point where I'm like, why did I work so hard for 20 years if not to be at the point where I can turn down, you know, things that are not exciting? Like that's the whole point of working your ass off for decades, is to reach a point in life where you don't ever have to do anything you don't want to do. So I, speaking of the not fun thing, I was under contract to do another book last year, and it just, I wasn't ready to write another book. I didn't feel ready. I was really getting into the online content stuff again. I felt like I really need to spend a few years kind of rebuilding my brand and, doing the podcast thing and the YouTube thing. And I was having so much fun doing that I went to my publisher and I was like, look, I know I'm supposed to give you a book this year, and I'm just going to let you know that I've not started it and I don't plan to. And, but if you give me a few years, I'll come back. I'll have better ideas. It'll be a better book and I'll have a bigger audience. So, it'll work out. And,
Were they all right with that?
No, they asked for their money back, and, it was a 7-figure advance. And so I wrote a 7-figure check to my publisher to, not write a book. And,
it must be hard though. And you can tell me what the process is. When they come to you going we want you to write a book, what if you don't know what you want to write about? Do you know what I mean?
They don't care. I mean, so this is,
I know that what you had as a publisher was probably one of the best in the world ever.
Right.
So they're really counting on you again. And you've done a second book and
right.
But still, I feel like you need to have it in you to go yeah, I've got a great idea. I'll come to you kind of thing. Or it doesn't work like that so much.
You would think. You asked earlier how things have changed.
You're not Leanne Moriarty, do you know what I mean? Which is a different kind of author. Mm-hmm. She's writing novels about, not that you couldn't.
Right.
But it's your genre of what you're writing about. I feel like you just have to sit with that a bit.
Yeah, for sure. But that's not. So you asked earlier how things have changed over time.
Yeah.
I think if I was in fiction, there'd probably be more patience. And I think if I was smaller, they would be more understanding, because it's the issue wasn't that book contract was so much money that they're if we don't get a book out of you this year, it's a hole on our balance sheet, right? And it's that's millions of dollars that they could be doing other book deals with other authors over the next 2-3 years, right? So there's a big opportunity cost for them. Whereas if I was a small author, they'd probably be yeah, sure, take your time. So that's the irony, right? Is that the more successful you become, the more important you become to them.
Yes.
Part of that importance is you account for a much larger percentage of their bottom line. And if they are going through, a rough spot financially, which they were, they can't tolerate that. And so they don't care if I have a book in me or not. It's I could just scribble down whatever and it'd probably still sell hundreds of thousands of copies, right? Yeah. And they know that. So they don't care. Yeah, put out a bad book, whatever. We just need to get our we need some revenue. Wow. And so it's shitty. I'm still mystified by it, because you would think that if you have a really top selling author, you'd really want to build a relationship with them and make sure you hold on to them, especially because I'm still young. So I'm going to probably write
a few books in you.
Yeah, I'll probably over the rest of my life, I'll probably write 5-10 more books,
totally.
So it's build that relationship. Let's ride this out for the long haul. But I think it was just, I don't think that they could just, and actually one of the people I talked to there, she told me, she was I hear what you're saying. I understand. And I love this for you. I don't think the bean counters are going to accept this. And I was okay. All right.
Does it make you a little bit, jarred in the sense of even these amazing creative spaces revolve around money? Do you know what I mean? I know we all are, in a sense. It's well, how much money am I going to make? And when I'm in deals with other people, how much are you going to bring in? How many tickets are you going to sell? And it's I'm still in the like, I'm giving out really good messages to people that would change their lives.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. But it is, I mean, it's a business.
It is a business.
Like, how do you get your head around that?
It's a necessary evil.
Yeah.
And like, look, it's not even necessary. It's like not even an evil. It's just like, let me put it this way. If it wasn't for the machinery of my publisher, Subtle Art never would have been nearly as big as it was. Like, they got it into so many stores and places and like distributed the hell out of it and helped market it and everything. So it is, that money, there is a return there. But it is a business, and it's like, I don't know. I almost think of it as like there's like two different brains that I turn on and off. Like, there's the creative brain, and when I'm in creative mode, the last thing you want to think about is business or audience or engagement or metrics or anything, because that hampers creativity. But then once the creative process is over, once you have the first draft or the first edit or whatever, then you got to put the business hat on and be like, okay, does this work? Is this gonna do well? Is this marketable? Can I go on TV shows and talk about this? What are my sound bites? And and then if the business side is not great, then you have a values decision to make, right? It's like, okay, do I believe in this piece of work or this piece of content enough that I'm okay if it doesn't perform well, financially or whatever. And sometimes that is the case. Like, there have been points in my career where I've made that decision. But ideally, you want to get both. You want to have the awesome creative thing that you're really proud of, and you want to sell the shit out of it because you want people to see it and read it and care about it.
When do you think in your mind that you'll be ready to write a book? Do you know?
My guess is in the next few years. Yeah. But I don't know. I feel like I need time to kind of, it's been almost 10 years since Subtle Art came out. I've been the fuck guy for a long time. And I'm older, it's like my life's changed quite a bit. Some of my views have changed a little bit. And the world has changed a lot. So I'm kind of in this phase right now where I'm asking myself, I'm like, okay, what does the next 10 years of my career look like? Who do I want to be? What do I want the messaging to be? And it's not about abandoning the subtle art of not giving a fuck stuff. It's more of like iterating on it or like pivoting it a little bit. Because my audience is growing up too, It's back then my audience was a bunch of rambunctious 20 and early 30-year-olds, and it's like now most of my audience is in middle age like I am. So people's perspectives change, their priorities change, the things they resonate change with a little bit.
What do you think is the biggest thing for you from a perspective, kind of shift that you've had on maybe something you've written about or that's kind of evolved for you, like a topic that you think, maybe I don't know if I feel that so much anymore, or you've had experiences that maybe have shifted it a little?
I definitely, it's like philosophically, I still agree with everything in that book. Like, there's no big issue or discrepancy. What I might, like, if I rewrote that today, I think I would weight things slightly differently, and maybe put a little more depth on some things and a little bit less on others. How do I put this? It's funny because the whole fuck thing is like kind of cut both ways, I think. It grabs a lot of attention and people really resonate with it. Like, they immediately identify, like, oh my God, I need to give fewer fucks, and they get really excited. But in some ways, I think it's like not the best framing for what people actually need to hear. I think ultimately what they're really struggling with is prioritization and like accepting the trade-offs in life, like accepting that there's a cost to everything, and not being in denial about that, and like not judging yourself for that, like not being upset about it. So that's kind of the direction my mind is going recently, that it's like you're always going to be worked up and anxious about something. Like, we're human. That's just life. The question is like, is that anxiety controlling you? Is it oppressing you? Does it feel like it's coming out of nowhere? And if so, it's probably because you've made a lot of decisions that you are beneath your level of consciousness. Like, you're not aware of a lot of the decisions and behaviors that you've been making. And so yeah, that's kind of like the sandbox I'm playing in at the moment.
And I think, who doesn't write something in? How were you in your 20s when you wrote The Subtle Art?
I started it when I was right when I turned 30.
Yeah.
I started it, yeah.
So, if we don't evolve over time,
yeah,
that's a worry. Like, things that I thought at a certain time, have changed. Even like the American presidency.
Yeah.
I can see like my mind shifting on who I'm thinking like, okay, I understand this candidate, Like, the more information I get about the different parties, not like, in Australia, but still just things like that. And it goes back to education.
Sure.
And knowledge and listening to podcasts and reading books.
And value shifting.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you care about different things at 40 than you did at 30, and you care about different things at 30 than you did at 20. So it's, I do think, like, wisdom in a lot of ways is just like understanding what's worth caring about.
Yeah, totally. I wonder for you, through your personal development journey, what has been the best advice that you have ever been given?
My favorite, so I always answer this question. My dad told me something once, which has always stuck with me. When I was first starting my business, I was like a really small blogger in the dating relationship advice industry, and really struggling to get by, like barely kind of scraping an audience together. And I remember I had this piece, I like wrote about this concept that I had come up with, and I was really proud of it. Like, at the time I thought it was like, this was the best idea I've ever had. And I was like really excited, put a ton of work into this piece and posted it, and it did well. It was like my best, my best performing article at the time. At the time, I probably usually had a few hundred readers, and maybe that piece got like a couple thousand. And I was like, whoa, like this is working. Yeah. I'm making it. And then I remember like a week or two later, one of the biggest people in the industry put out a piece of content, and it was the exact same idea, and they took credit for it. And there was like no link or reference or anything to me. And this was somebody who's like had a huge business and was making tons of money and had a huge marketing machinery behind him. And I was so upset. I was like just really, really demoralized by that. And I remember, so my dad is a successful entrepreneur and business owner, and I've gone to him for advice, particularly business advice, over the years. And I remember I called him up and was just kind of venting and going on about it. And, he listened patiently. He told me a few stories, like similar things he went through. Yeah. And he told me, he's like, Mark, there's two ways to be successful in this world. You can either spend all your time trying to find and collect golden eggs, or you can just figure out how to be the goose that keeps laying golden eggs. And if you learn how to be the goose, it won't bother you if somebody comes and steals one or two, because you can just lay more. And that's always stuck with me. And as like this industry, you get ripped off all the time. Like how many books have fuck on the cover now?
Oh my God. And they keep coming out.
I know.
It's so weird.
I know. Every time I see a new one, I'm like, yeah, how's that working out for you? Like, because it's none of them hit. Okay.
But
so
like, are they trying to get off on the fact that someone might be thinking they bought your book by mistake, and then they open it and go, oh no, this is what it's so weird.
And by the way, nothing annoys me more than when I'll see a comment online, or occasionally somebody will say in person, they're like, oh, well, it's definitely the title. That's why the book did. I'm like, oh, really? It's the title. They're like, yeah, it's the F word. And then I'm like, well, what about the other 25 books with the F word in the title? Anyway, but it's helped me. I've always had like a peace about it of like, yeah, well, let them take it. Like, it excites me because then it challenges me to like, what's the next new thing? What's the next innovation? What's the next new idea? So yeah, that's my answer.
You have quite a lot of really great quotes on your Instagram and other social media tools other social media platforms you use. And I wonder, do you have a favorite? Or one that you think about a lot or has helped you?
Favorite. There's one that I'm a pretty big fan of, and it always does well. So I repost it probably every 6 months or so. I don't remember how I came up with it, but it's something like, nobody's gonna stand up at your funeral and say he fucked like a wildebeest and had the best golf swing I ever saw. Life's about loving people, not impressing them. And it's like that one.
So good.
That one always takes off when we post it, and yeah, I'm like really fond of that one.
And our final question, Mark: what is a life of greatness to you?
I think a life of greatness is minimal regrets.
Lovely. Mark Manson, it's been an absolute pleasure having you come into the studio. You're always such a wise person to talk to. Thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing whatever you have coming up in the future and all your online stuff, your podcast, your books. Thank you.
Thank you.